Community Church of New York. It is really a joy and also an honor to be with you this afternoon at this special service. Thank you so much, Peggy, for the invitation and the warm hospitality. I do have a little bone to pick with you. You told me it was very casual here. I feel it's very fancy this afternoon. So I'm trying to be fancy, taking deep breaths along with the wonderful worship leaders. It's a privilege to be part of this service and to be with my dear friend and colleague, Susan Frederick Gray. Thank you, Susan, for your words of power and truth. And I especially want to thank you for the way that you have held us as the president of our UUA through these particular years and this particularly difficult time. Our world, our planet is passing, changing. As the poet reminds us, our world is rife with devastation. In many places near us and around the world, communities have been experiencing the impacts of fascism driven by racism, patriarchy, extractive capitalism, and militarism. And this afternoon, I want to take just a moment to name in particular Burma, also known as Myanmar, where UUSC has been in partnership with the grassroots through democracy movements, the defense of religious minorities and ethnic minorities, and broadly, the multi-generational campaigns for human rights there. At UUSC, after more than 20 years of work in partnership in Burma, we're heartened by the United States acknowledgement last year of the genocide, and we continue to support advocacy related to the International Court of Justice action as well. The other place in our world I lift up because we are all holding it in our hearts, a place, in fact, that has received a great deal more attention than Burma, is Ukraine. The egregious invasion by Russia of Ukraine. Last summer, some of the new partners that UUSC has been working with in Poland and Hungary, working with communities that are being displaced from Ukraine, some of our partners got together and asked if we might support them in bringing people together. They were seeing burnout and actually people leaving the work because they were so broken and exhausted from the work they had been doing supporting communities impacted, and the communities in particular who haven't been served by the larger, more mainstream humanitarian organizations. So we were most honored to be part of a partnership sponsoring a convening in Krakow, Poland, bringing together more than 25 feminist organizers and activists to, as they said, regroup, recharge, and recenter. We were so grateful for this invitation to be part of bringing the idea of rest as resistance into action. Well, I guess action is a wrong word for that. Rest as resistance, and having the opportunity to fund and help to facilitate this event was a great honor and privilege. Among the group was the executive director of the only LGBTQ organization in Moldova, director and president of an organization working for sexual and reproductive rights for women, Roma organizers and activists, as well as organizations using art and justice for transnational movement building. It was such a privilege for us to support this, and a powerful example of our theory of change at UUSC, our theory of change, that in relationships of a radical trust where people impacted by justice are leading, that's where change happens. That's where collective liberation is possible. I begin with this story, this image of these feminists gathering in Krakow, resting, regrouping, recentering for two reasons. One, to share just a little picture of the work and how UUSC understands the importance of partnerships. But also I share this because this is really what we're doing right now. Within the container of faith community, we gather to rest from the relentless, pounding, sometimes real, sometimes manufactured demands of our days. We stop. Just for this hour, we are saying that taking time for connection and meaning making and promise making matters. In this way, we hold one another in the midst of unthinkable losses. In this way, we find strength and courage and hope and faith for all that is possible when we are engaged in the great work of love, which calls us to justice. I heard you, Peggy, just a few weeks ago refer to this work as putting love at the center of all that we do, reimagining church. This coming week at the spring seminar, UUs come together, as we have for many years under the leadership of the UU office at the UN, committed to global engagement and to learning and practicing the skills that make it possible for us to take action locally to address global issues. Because we are one people sharing one planet. Because this is our one world. And as the poet Rosemary Watola Tromer said so beautifully in the reading Peggy shared, this is our world, rife with devastation and ripe with joy, and I would add possibility. The possibility is often deeply obscured. Can I get an amen? In the blur of some new outrage, some new image of our world, rife with devastation. So Arundhati Roy asks if in these liminal times, she asks us, in these liminal times, can we walk through the portal lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine a new world, ready to fight for it? Can we? Yes, I think so too. It's an act of faith to imagine, to reimagine. And by faith, I mean that meaning-making, promise-making business of living into our deeply held and cherished values. And I mean refusing to give in to empire's propaganda about power. Remember this, friends. When you are tempted by cynicism and despair, our cynicism and perception of powerlessness is exactly what empire is depending on, precisely how empire survives. Faithful imagination is, in Adrienne Maree Brown's words, looking further ahead. It is a practice that weaves connection and power, partnership and solidarity. And as Susan said, this is the way forward. I want to say power again because I think this is where we often lose faith, stumble, falter. And I've learned this in a new way since I've been at UUSC. Honestly, I actually had to be hit over the head with it a little bit there. For my first year at UUSC, I misread our mission statement, where we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person as we dismantle oppressions. Well, that is not actually what it says. At UUSC, our mission statement affirms the inherent dignity and power of all people. All people. Nowhere in my years of ministry have I witnessed more powerful expressions of faithful imagination than in UUSC Grassroots Partners. Nowhere have I seen faithful imagination practice weaving connection and power into real change in our world. And I close with the story of UUSC partner Pacific Island students fighting climate change. In 2019, in a law school classroom in the Solomon Islands, a campaign was hatched and launched. The community gathered there in that classroom decided that they wanted to move forward a project to demand that the United Nations International Court of Justice issue an advisory opinion acknowledging that climate change is a human rights issue. They said they wanted to bring the world's biggest problem to the world's highest court. It is such a clever and strategic campaign, calling on the United Nations to say what is obvious, that the climate crisis is creating an expanding human rights crisis. And by so doing, by the International Court of Justice acknowledging this, creating a framework of accountability, acknowledging the human rights impacts of climate change, and the responsibility of our global community to acknowledge the importance of intergenerational equity. In 2019, later in 2019, through an early grant from UUSC, some of the students from the Pacific Island Students Fighting Climate Change were able to travel to Madrid for the COP, the Conference of Partners. And there they were able to make connections and spread word about their project and their vision. And they took a small grant from UUSC and turned it into partnerships with 350.org, Greenpeace, Amnesty International, and friends, next week, the United Nations will vote on a resolution co-sponsored by 117 nations, signed on by 26 of 27 countries in the European Union who have already committed to advance this work and call for this advisory opinion. UUSC, I really wish that you could hear this story from them. It's so powerful to see their vision and these young adults, their commitment and their power. I'm sorry you can't see them. This week, UUSC has, in partnership with the Pacific Island students, authored a sign-on letter. We are grateful to be in partnership with the UUA and other organizations, actually calling for the United States to sign on to advance this work as well. So if you are a faith leader, please join us. You can find the letter on our website. And if you know a faith leader, I hope you might invite them to also sign on. It was September, is that when Climate Week happens? It was September this past fall when some of us from UUSC had the privilege of being with some of these leaders from the Pacific Island students, helping them facilitate a side event just down the road from here. It was the first time I had personally met the leaders of the organization and seen them at work, and I want to share that the thing that moved me most deeply, well, they came to share their stories, the real devastation they have experienced, the threat of loss that they face, their homes, their livelihoods, their very identities. Powerful storytelling and sharing. And as they shared these stories of devastation, they did it in a room that they had arrived early to, so that they could bring in art and plants and flowers, because for them it was not possible to speak about the work that they are called to, without acknowledging not only the devastation, but also the way our world is ripe with joy and beauty. That was in September. There were a few sign-ons then. Their work has been phenomenal. They call us into partnership. They call us into accountability. At UUSC, we give thanks as well for your partnership here at Community Church, our partnership with the UUA, with our College of Social Justice, and with all of us who are called to walk through this portal lightly and fight for this one world. My friends, we have one world. It is rife with devastation. It is ripe with joy.